Hello.
Hello. Apparently, I'm the GraphQL Foundation today.
You have been promoted. You are the entire foundation now.
I don't think there's many of us on the agenda.
Well, all the important people are here.
Me, you, Lee, and Matt, by the looks of it, yeah.
Yeah. Andy might be. I think he's caught up in another meeting. If he joins, he'll come in half an hour.
Cool. Get the live notes open. Just uploaded all the other videos to YouTube up until, well, yeah, whenever the last one was, 2 days ago.
Wow. Do you have any special video editing software?
No, we really ought to, because honestly, there's a lot that often needs trimming off the beginning. And at the moment, I just upload them as is because we don't dedicate time for that.
There's a billion other things to do, so fair enough.
That's it. I figure it's not too hard for someone to just skip the first, 3 minutes or whatever on YouTube if they need to. But yeah, it would be nice to automate at least some truncation and clipping of the videos, if nothing else.
Well, plus then they get to hear all of our banter at the beginning and then.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's fine most of the time.
That's what you come for, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, absolutely.
Come for the banter, stay for the.
We're not robots here.
But sometimes you just get 15 minutes at the beginning where someone connected really early and no one else is there. It's just silence for 15 minutes.
Yeah. I do that for work meetings, not for the recorder ones, and that's my secret to turning up on time.
That's funny.
Lee, you've got a literal thinking cap.
I do. Yeah, I had to put it on today. It's pretty important. Without it, I'm at a loss.
Hey, Matt.
We actually have a handful of things to talk to. It's good. I was curious to see if we'd have much agenda. Any overflow time we have, I'm going to use to get our creds set up. I've been a little bit underwater since last meeting, and now over the last week, but it's still on my radar.
Well, then we'll make sure we keep it short.
I think it's just the four of us. I see unless
Yeah.
I'm missing a pull request.
Nope. If Andy comes, he'll be in half an hour's time. He's doing something else at the moment.
Okay. Well, he didn't add himself to the attendees list, which means at quorum, we're going to get going. And if Andy hops in later, then fantastic. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to skip intros since everybody here has definitely already met each other. And we'll get on with business. Donna, since you were not here for last week's meeting, for your benefit, I'll just do like a quick step through of the major points there, just in case you had any questions.
Okay, cool.
Benji and Matt, you guys were both there. Okay, I'm pulling up the agenda doc, remind myself what all was there. TSC election results. Got ourselves a new TSC set of members. That was very exciting. So we talked a little bit about that. Then what I had just mentioned, this is the thing that has an action item on me, is Ricky's machine got compromised, I think, or at least there was a fear that it was compromised, and Ricky had access to some of our NPM release tokens. And so in the moment, I turned off Ricky's access just to, I think just in the rare scenario where there was something real there, we would be protected. Nothing bad happened, so good. But we wanted to have a better build infrastructure. So we just talked a little bit about what that might look like. The reason the action is on me is I need to go set up a NPM account that is not tied to any one of us, that we can then use as the source of truth for deploy tokens. Then we were talking about schema definition ambiguity, which Benji, I think that's probably related to the one that you've got to continue discussion today. We moved argument name uniqueness to stage 3, which was super exciting. I think we actually merged that one. We did. So that is officially in the draft spec. And then, as per usual, a healthy, long, deep dive into different stream, which this time was about continuing to gut check about how we do deduplication and responses, which I think we made forward progress. It's always a little bit hard to tell in some of those deep dive conversations. And then we spoke briefly about Yakov's rebasing of the work that I had done a while back on default value validations, which Andy's on top of. I think he actually got all that stuff updated and merged well before I did. So good on him. That was the main stuff. Any questions?
Oh, that's good.
Cool. I'm gonna pop open action items just in case there's any lurking there. There are not. Okay.
And just
Benji?
I've got to go at 11, but I'm hoping then I can pass the baton to Andy if there's anything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a sense, given the agenda is tight, that we'll probably wrap everything up by then. All right, Benji, on to you.
Okay. Well, Matt and Lee will already know this because we talked about it at the last meeting. Though I have advanced it just a smidge since then. We have a little bit of ambiguity in the spec, or possibly, I mean, there's a little bit of ambiguity and there's a little bit of just being a little bit wrong. Generally, what we wanted from the SDL and the introspection is that, or like a schema, is that you can turn a schema into an SDL and then you can turn the SDL back into a schema, and it's always like a closed circle. It's always the same thing. But that doesn't seem to be the case in the circumstance where you have, for example, a query type called query and a type called mutation that is not supposed to be a mutation type. For example, a virus mutating, you might track it with a mutation type, not have it be your operation type. And the spec kind of says, even if you have a schema like that, you would print it out and say that that is the mutation operation type or something like that. So we wanted to clarify that's not the case, tidy that up, make it more consistent. So we've come up with a simple test case for it, which is shared in the GraphQL spec pull request 987. And I have implemented this as a test in GraphQL.js, implemented the fix as well, and the spec text, which is currently RFC1. It's pretty, I mean, to be honest, it's ready to be RFC2. We just wanted to bring it to more implementations awareness. Hence, hello, GraphQL Java. Here's the thing. Have you seen this already?
Yeah, I did have a look at it earlier this week. So there's two things. There's like an operation type definition of something object, which does correctly exclude this virus mutation, but then on the schema object that we have, it does set the mutation type to be this virus mutation. So that behavior is wrong, and I'm going to fix that. Yeah, so it's really good that you brought this up.
Good. Okay, cool. So, I mean, I could propose moving it to RFC2, or we can leave that to the next main one. What do you think, Lee?
I think so. I'm just going to take a minute to look through just the work that you had put up.
Sure.
Thanks for spotting this async Donna and getting on top of putting the failing test in place. And Benji, it looks like you got some TypeScript written up that does the appropriate printing behavior. I
There was
love the-
actually, maybe I can pick your brains on this. Maybe you'll know the answer. There was an issue in the GraphQL JS with a test case. Yeah, here we go. I put it in the main thing. Unnecessary test. There seems to be a test where we create a schema just using the query type with a foo field. And then we build that as a schema. And then we introspect it. And then we delete the fact that it has a query type. And then we try and print that out. And at the moment, we're asserting that when we print that out, it will just print it as like type query. But of course, according to the now corrected rules, the fact it has a type query, but it isn't the query type means that it should have a schema block to say that the query is not the query type, but then you'd have a schema block with nothing in it. You'd have schema, open curlies, close curlies, right? Because there is no operation types because it's not really a valid schema. So my question is, why does this test exist? Like, why is it there?
Did we update?
Can you drop a link to that if you find it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's right here in the chat. It's the JS pull request, and it's got a code block in the top comment there that you can just open up. The the main issue comment description.
Oh, I see. Sorry, Donnie, you were saying something.
I think it was me. Were we
Oh.
making the query type optional? Did we make that change
I
somewhat?
don't think we made that change, but we were talking about it at one point.
Because that might be what the test is attempting to state. Yeah, it looks like that's trying to say, okay, it is possible to print a schema that has no query type. And I think in that case, you're correct that it should actually give you schema open, close.
But that
I
won't
believe-
pass.
I think it parses, it just doesn't validate.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, it doesn't parse because you have to have some
No.
root type.
Because it won't pass past the. You get an open curly. As soon as you hit the close curly, it's like, I don't know. It won't pass in
I see.
GraphQL JS. I don't know whether it's a spec issue or a GraphQL JS issue. But yeah, like that was my first thing, and I noticed the pass error. Hence, other approach.
I wouldn't.
One
be
option would be to
surprised-
change the test case to give it like a mutation operation, and then it would have mutation but no query. But there was no point doing that if I didn't really understand why the test was there in the first place.
Spec says that a query root must exist. But the schema printer, it's not a requirement of the schema printer to only print valid schema. Because you can imagine a case where you create an invalid schema and then there's an error and you want to be able to like illustrate where the error is. And so you need the ability to print invalid schema so you can point to it in an error message. And so that's a lot of the reason why some of these test cases are here.
So my solution to it, which meant that I didn't need to actually edit that test case, is to special case it inside of the is schema of common names method inside of print schema, which basically just says if there is no query operation type and there's no mutation operation type and there's no subscription operation type, then just pretend it's using all the standard names, i.e. don't output a schema block. I'm not sure it's the right fix, but it works.
That might be right. So one of the things that I'm assuming that this might be a result of is internally we shard our schema into a whole bunch of files and we use the schema printer, like we use GraphQL JS to actually do that. So like we can have a schema file that we print that has no mutation or query or subscription type inside of it. And in that case, we want neither a schema block nor Like, yeah, so that might
But
be.
if you've got types called query and mutation in there at the
We
moment, then
don't.
when that's passed back, but if you did, but they weren't meant to be those operation types, when you read it back, they suddenly will be operation types.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing is that our query and mutation and subscription types are sharded across files. So we would end up with, and they may not be named query mutation subscription. I think they are for us, but they might not be, like, they're not guaranteed to be necessarily. So like you need a way to print. Yeah, I could be wrong, and this might have nothing to do with why this test exists. I'm just trying to like figure out Chesterton's fence here.
Well, this is basically the main, as far as I see it, the main outstanding question from my point of view as to what the correct approach is. And I don't feel that I know the answer.
There are a handful of places. So I think there's like an entire domain of work that we've just kind of conveniently not stepped into all that much, which is incremental parsing. Most of our parsers sort of assume a complete, well-formed document, which if you're writing a thing that turns a file into a schema is great. If you're building a IDE tool is extremely frustrating because you'll be like halfway through typing a thing and then all of a sudden it'll like stop, or you'll get a parse error. And so a lot of the folks who have built syntax highlighters or other like smart IDE stuff have had to roll their own technically non-compliant parsers that just are looser. And there's probably a category of parse rules that we have where we will make a thing where the parser says there needs to be one or more of this thing. And of course that makes sense if like you got to have one or more for that part of the schema to be valid. But where like we're probably leaking validation logic into the parser. And this is one such example. So Benji, I think everything you said just made a lot of sense, which is like if you have no type called query mutation or schema and you have no root types, then you of course don't need to print that block. I think that's the right thing, because why print an empty one if there's nothing there? But if you have a type that somehow has a query type and a mutation type and a schema type named, but then none of those happen to be their respective root types, there are in fact no root types, then we go try to print a thing that can't be parsed. And that seems probably unsatisfyingly restrictive.
So at the moment, we will print it and it is parsable. But when you parse it, it won't know that what you printed was invalid, and it will just read it out and it will go, oh, there's a query type. Oh, that's a query operation, which I think is an okay failure mode. Like if your schema is not valid when you write it out and you read it in and it becomes valid, then I mean,
you mean like if you have a query type and it's not a root, and therefore
yes.
you
Imagine
print the
you
schema
just
block and there's
literally
nothing
have
in
a query type. Yeah, just a query type. It's not a root. There is no roots, just a query type, foo field in it, nothing else. When you write it out, there's no schema block. It's not even a full valid schema. When you read it back in again, according to the GraphQL spec, it is now, because it's got query type using the default name.
Yeah, this feels fine.
Maybe. I don't know.
Like,
Something about that seems maybe wrong. Because like when you go through the print parse loop, you should get back what you started with.
Yes, but
unless
only when
you're
it's a
invalid.
valid schema.
I think even if it's invalid.
In which case we need to have like an empty schema block potentially.
So
yeah,
technically what you print and what you parse and then print again will be the same. Because
that's true.
technically it all will be, it will like the
I see what you're
loop
saying.
will end up with the same like printed text. It's just the meaning that you had for your schema, like your schema is invalid and you're like creating a valid schema by printing parsing that prints and parses identically.
One to think about. Should we move on to Matt so that Donna's got a chance to hear what Matt's
Yeah.
talking about as well?
Yeah, I've got a minor tweak on your PR, and then I think that can probably get merged. We can move this forward. Okay, Matt, on to you.
Yeah, so fragment arguments, I still have basically GraphQL JS PR waiting for some form of review. I think, so I have a diff that has basically no pushback from the relay folks besides add some tests for adding the syntax to relay, making sure the syntax works, all that. But we can't actually flip the switch to using the syntax until the tooling ecosystem starts using the syntax. We don't need servers to be using the syntax, but we do need lint and prettier and like we don't actually need graphical yet because the server can't understand things, so we can't actually put stuff into graphical. That's fine. But yeah, basically like even to move from draft to like accepted, we will require the tooling ecosystem. Like before any servers have the new syntax, we still will require the tooling ecosystem to support the syntax. And I don't think we've seen any pushback since like December or November on, from a user-facing standpoint, what the syntax should look like. Like there's doesn't seem like really any, there's like internal questions about how exactly does it work? How exactly is it scoped? But like from a, this should produce an AST and it like should look like, this is the shape that it should look like. I haven't heard any feedback, any like pushback. So, so I guess the options there are like, are basically, we could introduce it in a flag in GraphQL JS to get it pushed earlier, but not have people like running servers with it. Or yeah, basically like the thing I'm bringing up for the working group is what are we lacking to get it through GraphQL JS? And maybe that's just review.
I think it's review. So I think the tricky part about landing it without a flag is whatever behavior you produce, once you merge it and you get a version out there, is the behavior that people will start to rely on,
Yep.
which really starts to limit your ability to work through sort of the final phases of the RFC.
So I did originally have a flag and then you recommended I remove the flag, but I think, yeah, but that was like a year and a half ago or something,
Okay.
whatever. I do think it probably makes sense to basically, right now the diff removes the fragment variables flag, like the special fragment variable syntax flag. It probably makes sense to just change the name of that flag. So like, yeah, if you were depending on fragment variables, which nobody should have been besides Meta because we were the ones that forced that. Now there's this new flag instead, and the parser can just not understand things unless it has the flag. And that lets us, from a tooling ecosystem, like make sure that the tools can pass that flag or whatever. Or even we could do it at the flag could be after the parser, and instead in the we could have a validation that just is like, yo, yes, there are fragment variables, but you can't, like, servers need to validate that this they don't work. So either of those would be fine.
I think keeping a flag, but renaming it seems very reasonable to me if you're going to start to change up all the behavior. Then naming it something else makes sense. Is there a compelling reason to not have the flag until we've like dialed in all of the behavior?
I don't think so.
Okay. That was my sense. Because then you can get all the tests landed. You can kind of leave it in a working spot. You can have some tests that apply the flag and then do everything that you want it to do. Which should unblock our ability to like, test the corner cases and make sure everything's working as expected. And then also unblock the ability for relay to rely on that version with the flag enabled to then test out relay as a dependency and make sure you haven't missed anything. There's like some, I don't know, 20% chance that there's like some edge case that you missed that relay needs.
Yeah.
Okay. Is the action here then just to review the pull request?
Probably action 1 is to add the flag, like add back or rename the flag and add it to the parser, which is actually the exact same approach we're doing with relay. So that's fine.
Cool.
But
that sounds right. That means that you've got a minor update to make on the PR.
Yep.
Sweet. Yeah, if there's a flag there, then I have no qualms about landing something that is, we know will very likely have some iteration on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah. The big question before we actually like make it finalize it into the spec is probably the scoping behavior. Specifically like that this algorithm for how we can scope, which like there will probably be iteration. There might be iteration on that, or we'll be like, it's good enough. And we are very confident that behaviorally it won't change, even if we explicitly add scope instead of do this replacement thing that we're doing now. But
is that just like an implementation detail, or is that observable different
It's
behavior?
an implementation detail. It's weird because it's an implementation detail both of the spec and like if it was just an implementation detail in GraphQL.js, I'd be even less worried. But it like the spec changes are simpler and produce the same end result. I think I'm like fairly confident. So it's like an implementation detail of the algorithm that we need to describe in the spec, which is fine. Like you could implement it in a different way and get the same result. And then,
Okay.
Yeah. I could talk more, but I can also end here.
I mean, it makes sense to me. I think that's the right move.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll try to give a cursory read through what you've got up anyhow,
Yeah.
knowing that you're going to add that to it just in case there's anything else I spot.
Yeah, I'll flip the flag right after this.
Sweet. Cool. Is that our agenda?
Do you mind if we circle back to my previous topic for a moment?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. Yeah, I was just thinking about it a little more. And I was thinking about the pass, print, pass cycle. And effectively, there isn't a way of passing... cheers. There isn't a way of passing a schema that doesn't have any root operation types currently, unless they don't have the default names.
What do you mean by that?
If you
Say
have,
that again.
if you have like type query, right? Literally type query foo string, right? Just that. There's nothing that you can add to that to make it a schema that doesn't have a root operation, any root operations as SDL.
Right. You would need to add some arbitrary other type. Say you added a type called mutation, and then you added a schema block that said the mutation type is called mutation. Then
Exactly.
you would not have query, right? Because you've specified your schema block.
Exactly. But that doesn't trigger our problem.
Right. And so presumably a thing that you could potentially add, but our parser currently disallows, is a schema block with nothing in it, which is to say I have
Exactly.
schema and I have no root types in my schema.
Exactly that. That, I believe, at least in GraphQL.js, doesn't pass. It probably needs validation to check that that is definitely the case. But I think it won't pass.
Is there any value to doing this? Because I think, to Matt's point before, the only case, like, imagine you're building your virus with the mutation case again, and you've got every type in a separate file. The file that contains the mutation type, you don't need to add something there that says, by the way, this is not the GraphQL mutation type, because presumably somewhere in what would then become the concatenated set of SDLs, you would have the schema block, which intentionally omits that, or maybe you have a GraphQL mutations type or something that you've put in place.
Exactly. And I think putting a schema curly brackets, close curly brackets in every file would be undesirable.
Yeah. Well, plus you can only have one of them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think
we let you say
the
extend,
only way,
but yeah.
The only way to get into this situation at the moment is if you build the schema through code, assign types, like do new GraphQL schema, pass it types, but don't pass it query, mutation, or operation. In which case you then have a schema with no root operation types, which you can then print. I'm not even sure that you can actually construct that in GraphQL.js either. Like the test
I think
makes
that's why
the
we
schema
delete
and
it.
then deletes. Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think
I'm
we're far
happy
enough down the
with-
rabbit hole that, like, if that's like a weird edge case that we know exists, but we've decided to not do anything about, I don't feel that bad about it.
Yeah, I think I'm actually more confident now that it is the right solution, what I've currently written into GraphQL.js. Which is, if there's no operation types, then don't put the schema block in anyway.
Also, just realized on the schema merging thing, the real answer is you read in each file, you parse them into ASTs, and then you merge all the ASTs before you construct your schema. And I'm fairly confident that that is, in fact, what we do whenever we encounter this.
Yeah, which is produces the same result. It's just faster.
Although we might, I think we may not have in the past, before there was a SDL AST, which I think there was a point where GraphQL.js parsed directly into schema types, which might be the root of this weirdness.
I think it was from producing these code first.
Maybe.
I don't remember the origin of this particular test.
Anyways, yeah.
Is there an action that I should take forward, or is it now just basically waiting on others to review, in which case I'll give some people a poke?
I think, yeah, I'm happy to give it a quick review. There's some, I think the main thing that I was curious about is whether you need the question mark null after those.
Oh, it's because sometimes it can be null and sometimes it can be undefined. And I did it without that. I think it's what was this? There was a subtlety there.
This is a thing that I don't like about how we've set up the types. Like we've intentionally set up our maybe type to be or null or undefined. But
yeah,
which is, I
that
think,
is
inherent.
literally what the issue was. Yeah.
It was a port from Flow because Flow defined. I don't remember
Well,
if
I
it had
think
a maybe type out of the bat, but anyway.
it was actually
yeah.
worse than that. One of them returns undefined and one of them returns null. So I think if you do like get query type, I think it returns null. Whereas if you say get type query, where query is a string, then it returns undefined because I think it looks it up in a map and doesn't find anything. So then I couldn't just say if the types are the same, like if they're both null or if they're both not null and the same thing, which was obviously a lot neater than writing a ton of if statements. I can go back to the old pattern. You can see the old pattern that was in there, which is like get the query type, and if the query type exists and its name is query. But I thought that this was more straightforward to just say, here's the query operation type, here's the query type, or null, and then if they're the same and they're always the same, then we do one thing, otherwise we do the other.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
It's nice in
I'll poke
PHP
it.
as well. I saw from Spawnier's work.
And the initial case, the special case that you had to do, that's related to what you're talking about before.
Yeah, so you can see that. Yeah, that's line 118. It's
Mhm.
just if there is no operation types, then we effectively say it's a schema of common names, though that's technically a lie. But I didn't want to rewrite too much of it.
We say that this is a schema of common. Actually, what it is it's
should
an
we
invalid
omit the schema block is what? Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. The answer is if it doesn't have any of those, it's not a valid schema. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. I'll poke at it and see if I have any opportunity to simplify, but otherwise I think this looks great. It's nice that it is
cool.
terse and it's got a test, which is what you want. And this must rank for one of the best test names. Prince Viral Schema.
Yeah.
We're going viral. Awesome. All right. I think we can wrap it up.
Need anything from me on the permissions stuff, like graphical related?
I don't think so. I think it's just a matter of getting the initial stuff set up and then getting tokens in place. But I will let you know if I spot anything in the back half of that process.
Cool. When you're adding adding Ricky to the relevant teams, could you add me to them as well, please?
Yep.
Awesome. Fantastic. And anyone else that makes sense.
Yeah, we'll do.
Cool. Fantastic. Thanks, everyone.
All right, friends. Quick and easy. See you soon.
Yeah.